Well, greetings and welcome to your Sunday premier political show, Inside Politics. As always, it's a pleasure to have you with us as we take a look and dissect the latest developments, matters to do with governance and politics, all that has played out in the course of the week in the country. This is your assured home of verified information in terms of analysis. Feel free to plug into the conversation at KTN News, at the Jesse Rogers, using the hashtag Inside Politics, and we'll definitely sample your views as we continue with the show. I'm not alone. I'm joined by my colleague Emmanuel Tor on the other side of our studios. Emmanuel Tor, it's great to see you. What's the latest in terms of how the week has been?
Well, it is great to see you too, Jesse, and definitely it has been a week packed with activities from the National Assembly, Senate, and of course the general political arena. And some of the key things that took center stage include the Kisii Deputy Governor, Robert Monda, was impeached actually, becoming the first Deputy Governor to be impeached since the promulgation of the Constitution of Kenya 2010, and of course since the beginning of the devolution era. And of course, the vote went through that heated session that saw about 39 senators agreeing with the charges, the 4 charges that had been leveled against Monda in that hearing. And of course, he's now set to move to the Court of Appeal to seek a rejoinder, of course, to get another opinion from the courts regarding that impeachment. Remember, Governor Mike Sonko was one of those people who went to the full breadth and length of the impeachment process, going to the Court of Appeal and even to the Supreme Court, where he did not succeed. And the net effect of this impeachment means that the Deputy Governor, Dr. Robert Monda, may not, or actually will not, occupy public office until actually to the last of this administration. And of course, we wait to see whether that court will give him the reprieve that he has been looking for. Something that is closely linked to the activities that took center stage as well this week is Raila's AUC hurdles. Remember, there was a meeting in Addis Ababa, and Raila Odinga, or Baba as they say, is seeking to go to Addis Ababa to get that seat, the chairmanship, towards that election that is coming in February next year. And the Council of Ministers, Foreign Affairs Ministers, who met in Addis Ababa, ruled and of course agreed to shelve, or actually said that this is the time for the Eastern Africa region to produce the next chair who will succeed Musa Faki as the next chairperson of the AU Commission. And something that was also very critical that Raila Odinga was waiting before he could now go full throttle in his campaigns is that decision that the next chairperson will not be determined whether it will be a lady or a gentleman or a man or a woman. It will be open for all, and that clears the hurdles that had been put on his way towards Addis Ababa. And remember, the Foreign Affairs Minister of the PCS, Musalia Mudavadi, said those hurdles have now been cleared and his way is now open. And they will be beginning some campaigns in May and April and May with the President, William Ruto, with some trips to the eastern, western, and southern regions. Something else that also took center stage this week is the Affordable Housing Bill 2023, which was passed by the National Assembly after it was passed as well by the Senate. Remember, it was passed by the National Assembly before going to Senate and coming back to the National Assembly. There were 2 key proposals and changes that were made by the Senate, which included that proposal to have of course, 1.48% of the levy coming from both sides, from those in the formal sector and those from the informal sector, meaning even those who are not employed formally will now be taxed and, of course, get that 1.5% levy cut from their salaries beginning the end of this month. Remember, there was a meeting, the Kenya Kwanza PG in Naivasha, which agreed that bill must pass at the middle of this month before that deduction taking place next month. Something critical that also happened in the House is the NADCO referendum. Are we going to see that referendum? And maybe, Jesse, you'll be asking your panelists this one, because we spoke to the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee chairperson, George Murugara, who said there are some recommendations in the NADCO report and in the bills that were taken to that committee, the Joint Committee of the JLAC of the National Assembly and the other one from the Senate, that will change the basic doctrine structure, or rather doctrine structure of the Constitution, meaning there will be changes that will affect the heart of the Constitution, and that will mean that Kenyans must go to the plebiscite to decide whether they want those changes effected. And we'll be getting that full report in the report that will be tabled in the next 45 days, or rather less than 45 days, when the report will be tabled back to the House. So Jesse, that is the match that we had this week, and we'll be giving you some more in an interview that we did with George Murugara, the chair of JLAC. Jesse.
Well, thanks, Sto. Definitely important to break down what key developments have played out in the course of the week. And that will form part of our discussion right here with my panelists joining me on the round table. Allow me to introduce them. I'm joined by Frederick Okango, who's a Secretary Political Affairs at Azimio. Okango, it's great to have you with us. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
I hope your Sunday is going on well.
Fantastic.
So far, so good. Yeah. Okay, equally joined by Ruth Kinyanjui. This time we don't have a Manil, so thank you for joining us on Inside Politics. She is a strategic and economic advisor. I hope you're having a wonderful morning.
Sure. Thank you so much. Good morning.
Asante for your time. And we're joined by a familiar face, Ishmael Nyaribo, an advocate of the High Court. Karibu sana wakili. Hope you're having a fantastic morning.
Thank you. Yes, I'm doing that. Thank you.
Okay, gentlemen and lady, let's start with one of the top stories that played out in the course of the week, all to do with Robert Monda, who was this week impeached by the Senate after senators voted to uphold all 4 charges that were brought against him by the County Assembly of Kisii. Now, the former Nyaribari Chache Member of Parliament is the first deputy governor to be removed from office through impeachment since the counties were actually established in 2013. And we saw 2 days of cross-examination at the floor of the House, where the MCAs had their day to argue out their case, and the deputy governor, who has been impeached, Robert Monda, through his legal counsel, equally argued out their case. Let's just listen in to one of the submissions that was handed over by Robert Monda, briefly, in terms of the accusations that were raised against him and his defense. Or rather, let's buy time as we wait for that. But it's proper to note, at the heart of the allegations was an 800,000 shilling bribe from one Dennis Mokaya, with the promise of securing him a commercial manager position at the Kisii Water and Sanitation Company, as well as the arrest of the brother of the DG, that's Ruben Monda, for allegedly cutting down some trees on their family land. So according to the senators, those 4 counts definitely stood the test of time, and according to Chapter 6, he did not carry his position in the manner in which is conferred upon the Constitution. So let's start with you, for obvious reasons. You come from that county.
I hope. I thought somebody else would start.
No, because he's the first deputy governor to be impeached. Yeah. Where does this leave Kisii County? Bearing in mind, we've seen the altercations between the governor and the deputy and some high-level members of parliament from the region. Yes. Does this calm down the waters in the county? And did Senate do their job?
First and foremost, I come from Nyamira County, but I do also have interest or investment in Kisii County, and it's my county too. It's very difficult to begin, because when you say that one of the reasons why the deputy governor was impeached was because his brother brought out evidence that they had cut family trees, and this was a consideration by the Senate, honestly. The less I say of that, the better, because that's a huge embarrassment for first the mother of the 2 brothers to come out here in the Senate and in the public and say, you know, he cut down the tree, so he's not a right man. But besides that, Jesse, going deeper into the seriousness about this impeachment, this demonstrates that devolution has not properly been understood by the residents of various counties. In terms of, we are talking about a budget of about 10 million coming from the national government, plus other donations and loans that come into the county, which the executive is supposed to manage properly for the people of Kisii County. And yet, for about 2 years, groups emerge simply to try to stage a claim over how county should be governed, away from the promises the winner governor has given. And then people come up and say, no, we think he's not right. And another group comes up and says, no, he is right. And for 2 years, they are going to haggle about that until they actually bring the deputy governor for impeachment. So for me, the fact that the Gusii, the Kisii County people, the residents, have not appreciated that we are fiddling and playing with a huge budget from the national government just because of selfish ends and trying to, point fingers to one and another in terms of selfish and personal interests. But in terms of are they utilizing this, then you go deeper to see what is the governor spending on development and what is the governor spending on emoluments and salary and water and tea. That is where the major problem is. And you cannot resolve that by putting forward the selfish interests of trying to, specifically argue about what you want as a family or what you want as an individual. You should look at the bigger picture of the Kisii community and the Kisii as a county. How can we tap into the national cake where about 10 billion is going to the county per every financial year? And we were surprised that a lot of that money will go back to the exchequer because it has not been properly utilized. So devolution, in my honest view, then has not served the people of Kisii County, and they have not quite understood and appreciated how they can benefit from that advance from the national government. Before I sign off, I want to say one thing. The biggest problem, not only in Kisii County, but in devolution generally, is people who completely have no clue about governance and leadership are actually the people in the center. They are at the center of governing our counties. People have no clue. I mean, Simba Arati won elections, hands down, beat his opponents. There's no doubt about that. Instead of people knowing now we need unity, come together, support him to fulfill his mandate, even if it is Azimio mandate. Utilize the 10 billion or so that he can serve the people of Kisii County. Instead of doing that, people are being used by outside forces and try to camouflage through, you are not leading correctly, you are not doing it. Of course, the governor may not do everything correctly. But what are you going to do with this fat baby, this national cake? Nobody's addressing that. So it was, for me, a huge embarrassment for the family to go to the Senate and clearly show that they were, they had something sinister. And that is why the impeachment came. If you talk about bribery, definitely you must be removed from office if you have accepted a bribe. There is no doubt about that. If you have abused your office, whether you abused your office through your brother or mother, definitely you must be removed from office. Okay. But my point here, Jesse, is the Kisii County, the Kisumu County, Mombasa County, people should be focused more on how can we tap into the national cake, the billions we get every financial year, how can you utilize and use them towards helping the people rather than how can it come to me, rather than forming those cartels and then ensuring that we get the tender. If we don't get the tender, we sabotage everything. That's the problem which I think was actually facing the Kisii County.
Okay, you've definitely looked at the bigger picture. It's proper to note that Kisii Governor Simba Arati has 14 days to appoint a new DG if Monda does not decide to go to court to challenge his removal, as is his right. So Ruth, as you come in, it was interesting to see that voting in the Senate this time round was not strictly along party lines, that there was no voice of authority from the hierarchy of the party telling them this is how we'll be voting. It was a surprise to some, if not many, that the DG was actually kicked out because we had heard of rumors that Kenya Kwanza might align and save him, as was the case with Odol, the other deputy governor who was facing impeachment. Your observations on the impeachment hearings?
I looked at that and I was just wondering, because if there's one body that has always been considered to be sober in this country, is the Senate. But more so, especially in the case of, say, somebody like the Governor Kawera, who has been saved several times. So when I was looking at the issues critically, and I was like, I think one of the things that really exposed him was a fraud issue. There's no way he was running away from that. The other issues, actually, I found them, there was a lot of collaborative issues and partnership that really you can clearly tell are not happening from a county level. One of the things is, as our legal lawyer has said, when it comes to elections, and people are going together as in election to work together, like the case of a governor and a deputy governor, one of the things people should consider, if this is a person I can work with for a very long time, is it a person I can sit down and iron out issues? Is it a person I can always go to in consultation? If then some of those things are not working, as the case is in the whole issue of Monda, then there's a big problem, because it's only a year or the second year into the leadership. Yeah. So if there are things, that means there were an entrenched issue, or maybe Simba Arati took somebody who is going to give him mileage, so that he wasn't really ready to let him be properly in the leadership, because leadership is a case like of president and deputy president, is how you two work together and how you agree on power. On other issues, especially, I think one of the bigger picture that hasn't been looked at clearly, and especially on the devolution factor, is how counties can be able to benefit by unity, because there's no way that you cannot be able to unite together. If we look, for example, in the case of Kawira Mwangaza, the DG and the governor have stood together, and maybe that is what has really kept them together, and the Meru County. Maybe not.
Together,
yeah?
Sort of,
yeah. It's sort of, at least there is talking, you can tell there is talking. But when there is no talking, then clearly, even the minuscule issues that do not really necessarily, like the issue of trees, those things actually did not need even to flow all the way to the Senate. In terms of voting, I felt like the Kenya Kwanza had pulled already a few people from Azimio, this being viewed as an Azimio county, for example. And I felt like no one else was willing to stand or to maybe take in the issue of fraud, and especially because, especially to that level. Okay. On the flip side, as I finish, I look at it like the DG, for example, maybe had not been allocated enough responsibilities in the governance of the county, and then how does the Constitution then define properly, especially on the issues of devolution, how does the Constitution define the roles? What should be done by who? How the governor controls that, and how it cascades down to the DG and to the rest of the MCAs and everyone, so that the national or the county cake can be distributed properly and there can be benefit to common mwananchi.
Okay, that's well noted. As you come in, was there a stand that Azimio had while going into that particular voting on Thursday? Was there a party position? And equally, your take on Chapter 6 of the Constitution, because it requires public officers to bring honor and dignity to the nation. Is this a test that Monda failed from where you sit?
Thank you, Jesse. Let me start from how people arrive into public office. The constitutional principle on selecting people into public office is that they must, first of all, be suitable, competent, and have personal integrity. When Simba Arati nominated Dr. Monda to be his running mate for that position of the gubernatorial race, then he must have considered that. But also, politically, you consider a person that is able to bring in the vote, because in politics, the contest is about winning first. Now, if you look at these issues, today we can confidently say that there is a vacancy in the office of the Deputy Governor of Kisii County. That vacancy has been occasioned by removal from office following the provisions of Article 182. That means these gentlemen, the allegations were substantiated by the Senate, particularly on the issue of abuse of office and all those misconduct that has been alleged and have been substantiated by the Senate. Interestingly, Jesse, almost all those allegations were substantiated by the Senate. Now, this time, you notice the procedure for removal of a governor or a deputy governor follows that once that process starts at the county assembly, a member of county assembly submits a motion that must be supported by at least a third. Then that motion again must be supported by at least 2/3 majority of the members, and then it proceeds all the way. By the time they submit, the Speaker of the County Assembly submits to the Speaker of the Senate, then there is a case. But the Senate has two options: to go the plenary way or a select committee of 11. This time, it was the whole House. That tells you something. They needed to give every senator an opportunity to contribute into this issue, following the history of impeachments. Again, I would want to say, in this country, and Wakili here knows, we don't have a standalone legislation that talks of how you can impeach, that gives the procedure of impeaching a deputy governor or a state officer for that matter. And therefore, the provisions of County Government Act and the Constitution were used. Now, on the other question you have asked, Azimio la Umoja One Kenya as a coalition party is a party that respects the rule of law, is a party that is governed by the rule of law, and therefore there was no position of the coalition party as far as the issue of Dr. Monda is concerned. But what was there is the senators looked at the allegation and they attacked the allegation based on the facts presented before them. Wakili again knows, when you appear before the Senate for such impeachment, actually Senate acts as a high court. So it's like a court of law, and they have those powers. I can confidently say that having followed that process keenly to its conclusion, by the time the DG, Dr. Monda, was being impeached from office, you clearly see that the issues of devolution are at risk, because the county government receives a lot of money, but also the county government, particularly the executive, have an opportunity to offer services to the people, but they don't. Instead, most of the senior government officials use that opportunity they get to solicit bribes, to get favors, and so on and so forth. And that's why there's this abuse of office. However, I want to refer you to what we call the Controller of Budget report. Every 4 months, the Controller of Budget gives a report called Budget Implementation Report. If you look at it, where county governments have misappropriated funds, they have wasted. In fact, some of them go against the provisions of PFM, Public Finance Management Act. And in offering development that's supposed to be 30%, you saw the media, you people reported some do 8.7%, 5%. It means if we were to go by law and start process of impeaching the county government, then I'm sure there'll be more Mondas out here who have been impeached and out because they don't follow the provision of law. Number two, look at the report on the Auditor General.
Okay.
That is the only report that shall justify if the public money has been used efficiently and lawfully. Again, you can have so many of these guys out. Finally, on this, I would want to say that DG Monda has an opportunity to appeal that Senate decision. But even as he appeals it, because impeachment is a political process, the people who impeach DG Monda are politicians. Look at his relationship with Governor Simba Arati, who is Azimio. If you look at that relationship, you can see it is more like it is not repairable. So even if he was to get some reprieve from the court, then where is he going? So his goose is cooked.
Persona non grata in Kisii.
Just on that, by the way, just something I forgot probably to add. There's another bigger picture here. Just came to mind when my colleagues were addressing, your guests. Whenever the President of the Republic of Kenya and the official opposition leader back off and don't interfere, the process will be fair. I think we forgot to, he's saying that, everybody was. In reality, Raila Odinga did not make any calls. And in reality, the president did not want to bother because these two are now venturing into other bigger partnerships. So it is also very clear here that the executive and the leader of opposition play a big role in perpetuating corruption. I know this is a sensitive statement to make, but where they completely not interfere, members of parliament can be extremely fair and they can be objective. And I think Frederick is saying, he may appeal, I think it's bad if I, if I say anything negative. But in reality, what the courts look at in an impeachment process is whether the process was followed,
yes,
not the quality of law, how it was applied, whether the actual process was followed. And in this case, the county did their homework, the Senate did their homework, the Senate actually listened, and you could see that governors in Azimio, were kind of like, no, with this kind of evidence, we have to kindly escort you to go away from.
And maybe just to add something very small, I think a very contentious issue is also coming on the table is that how are then county government accountable, especially with the evidence from, say, the Auditor General and the controller of budget, now that they are not also abiding to law? Then where does that leave the nation at, especially because this is where we expect that the common, and even that is where the economic perspective or the economic activities spur. So where do we leave the Kenyans?
And as you finalize on that, President Ruto has been vocal about pushing for women governors, to open up the race, especially at that particular position. Recently, was it in Homa Bay, he spoke about the good things women governors are doing. Since you talked about the working relationship between the governor and the deputy governor, will this be a major hindrance if going forward, come 2027, let's say, that for every position taken by a man, let's say for the governor, the deputy governor is a woman? Will this hamper that working relationship that we've seen hasn't been at best between, the current crop of leaders? What's your take on that?
Actually, if you look at what the president has been saying, even for the last few, especially the 7G meetings that have happened, is that one thing you can tell is that he appreciates the fact that women leaders are more accountable. They are easy. There's a lot of ego when it comes to men leaders. Sorry to say, I know you are all men, but I think that harbors a lot of development. And you can see the 7G women, and in the interest of diversity, equity, and inclusion, they really work very well. And you can see it's working across both Azimio and even Kenya Kwanza, meaning that there's something good. And even in the statement that he said that he will consider a woman vice president in the future, or deputy president, is also a good thing. And with maybe the issue that you want to raise on the issue of going back to the constitution and maybe having a referendum, maybe these are some of the things that we are going to be passed across, and we see that whether there is going to be more inclusion. Because even before we go back to, for example, I'm looking at the 7 women governor out of the 47 of the counties that we have. Is it a representation already over that rule? So if it is, then has that been implemented properly across even the government? Then maybe not. Then how then are we going to consider a lot of diversity? And maybe one of the issues with the Kisii County, I haven't seen really strong women in the Kisii counties. Maybe our legal, our lawyer here can... There are quite a number. But in terms of reconciliation, I think women play a very huge role in governance and also in leadership.
Okay. I had a guest who was here, and just briefly, who mentioned that the president is inclined to speak good about women leaders because he was at a function where women leaders are there. You get, so you don't go to a funeral and start laughing. You will heap praises on the women leaders.
Jesse, having observed Honorable William Ruto in the last days, from the time he started playing his politics and the time he was sworn in as the President of the Republic of Kenya, you can also agree that he was speaking to women on their day, International Women's Day. So he was also obligated to encourage them and tell them what he thinks could be the best way to address the issue of two-thirds gender principle. However, we can only believe him when this actually happens. If for sure President William Ruto believes in the women leadership, if President William Ruto believes that the next deputy president or president should be a woman, then President William Ruto, if he's the candidate for UDA, then he must ensure that his running mate is a woman. Not in 2032, because he will not be running, but in 2027. If he doesn't do that, then we don't believe him. Number two, we know for sure that the issue of gender principle is a constitutional principle. It is not by the way, it is not please. It is an issue that must be implemented as per the Constitution. He took oath of office to protect the Constitution of Kenya 2010. So he must do it. Now, this issue of women doing better than men is a fact. I mean, we have seen it. But we have seen it at a time when women are endangered. They are trying their best to prove themselves. And that's why you can see the few that have stepped forward. Gladys Wanga, Gladys Bosholei, look at Kirinyaga Governor, Anne Waiguru. They have stepped forward. They went for elections and they have won this. Now, I think it is important that we support the women agenda by ensuring that we give them opportunity at the top leadership. They can never be topmost leadership as the presidency. I think with this, if president is serious, then we might have in future a female president in this country.
But just to add,
we need to take a short break. Briefly.
Just to add, right now the leadership of Council of Governor is with Anne Waiguru, meaning, and that house, we are not seeing it in order, especially because of the issues that are happening at the county levels, and especially on the rule of law when it comes to governance issues, and especially they are binding to the Chapter 6 of the Constitution. You see, then, how then can they be supported to ensure that some of these things are cascaded properly in all the counties to ensure that people are doing, or the rule of law is also cutting across everyone? Because as Frederick has said, there are many people who are still lying in the offices, still doing the wrong things.
Yeah, just, you know, when the president said that we should balance the gender, I think like your guest said earlier, he probably said it conveniently because he was in a female conference. That's a possibility. But more importantly, I think he was hinting at his deputy that it's not automatic that you're where you are. We could work out a different relationship. I think that was the more heavy statement. He got that opportunity really to pass that message. Lastly, it is people, by the way, who decide on the gender issue. It is the Kenyans. One of the biggest complications Simbarati has now, today, is nominating his deputy. The deputy Monda came from an area called Nyaribari, which is such a vast area where former Professor Samongeri, comes from.
So it's vote rich.
The complication in nominating a person, like you said, you should pick somebody you can work with. It is never like that. Sometimes it is people who choose for you. You know this, Frederick. It is people who decide, no. And clanism plays quite a bit in Kisii. So who he chooses now, whether male or female, it is people who have to decide. And even the gender rule, you want to give people honey and milk, but they don't want it. You tell them, please, let's go, at least if a governor is this gender, then the other gender comes in. But people don't want that. What can you do? So it really boils down to what people want.
Okay, let's take a short break right now. You're watching Inside Politics. We're just getting started, so do stay with us. After the break, we shift focus to Martha's National Dialogue Committee, where my colleague Emmanuel To is set to have a conversation with the chair of the Jailer Committee in the National Assembly, George Murugara, who speaks about the progress so far and whether we are at a referendum point. You're watching Inside Politics. We'll be back in a few.